Anyone that grew up watching the original trilogy of Star Wars films knows who Boba Fett is. This guy became a world-renowned badass and hero, despite not saying much, and won over the hearts of millions, just because he was cool. When the prequel films came out, and we got to see Jango Fett, the father of Boba, we knew that he had to be an even bigger badass for his son to turn out the way he did. So if you like this guy and wanted to see more of him, then boy did Lucasfilm have the game for you. Released in 2002, this game is a prequel for a prequel, set in between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. You are Jango Fett, recruited by the great Count Dooku, or rather Darth Tyrannus, to secure the bounty of Komari Vosa, a rogue Jedi and leader of the occult Bando Gora. Dooku's master, Lord Sidious, views the Bando Gora as a potential threat to his coming empire, so he sends his apprentice to deal with her, along with tasking him to find the perfect template for the clone army. Seeking to accomplish both tasks in a single stroke, he hires Fett to hunt down Vosa and prove himself. We've got Tamora Morrison back as Jango Fett, and you can tell this dude loves the role. I've heard that any chance he gets to play one of the Fetts, he would take it, and his optimism and love for the character and world really shine through. Jango has such a suave arrogance to him. He's a very likable person with plenty of badass one-liners, jokes, and little nuances to him that make him a great protagonist. You've also got his great friend and contractor, Roz, played by the wonderful Lucille Bliss, Clancy Brown as Jango's former friend and rival, Montross, Tamara Phillips as Vosa, who would later go on to play Asajj Ventress in the Clone Wars series, and Lyanna Walsman, returning from Attack of the Clones to play as Sam Wessel. The main cast is pretty great and lends a professional atmosphere to this game that other licensed games didn't typically get at the time, and still don't get to this day. You can tell a lot of heart and effort was put into this game. Crying out loud, there's animated bloopers and gags. How many games do that? How many games have that in general? The gameplay, let's get to that part. It's pretty standard. You play as Jango going through fairly linear levels, blasting any poor fool that gets in your way.
Pow, pow, pow.
You've got your twin blasters that, unfortunately, do not make that same sound from Attack of the Clones. You got a rope to tie up enemies, a flamethrower, grenades that are practically worthless, your visor to scout out upcoming threats, and of course, missiles for your jetpack. Jango's already a very mobile guy. I mean, just look at him go! With reflexes like this, it makes you wonder how he... The best thing about the game is the jetpack. It gives an immense layer of mobility to your movement and provides many options. Also, when you're in an area with friendly NPCs, they all think it's the coolest thing too.
Oh my! What's that?
Your fuel meter is pretty flimsy and is tied to your flamethrower juice, so don't get too reliant on the thing. It's great for correcting a jump when the game throws the occasional platforming at you, and it's great for just getting around. When you get the sporadically placed jetpack power-up, you can really go ham, and in my opinion, I think this is how the jetpack should have been normally. It's an amazing mechanic, but it also leaves a lot to be desired. There's room for improvement, so maybe in the sequel? Actually, if this game ever got a remake, I wouldn't mind it handling like Boba's jetpack from Battlefront 2. If this game looked like that, it would probably fly off the store shelves. Back on track though. The levels in this game are pretty whimsical, and they're all believably placed in the world of Star Wars. My favorite level is probably on Coruscant because of how alive it feels. I always think that if I look hard enough, I'll be able to see the Jedi Temple somewhere in the distance. As a kid, I spent hours exploring these levels, looking for secrets, and just taking in the atmosphere. This game puts you in the shoes of Jango Fett and just plops you into this world. It's kind of breathtaking, really. For 2002, this game looks really awesome, and the pre-rendered cutscenes are top-notch.
Are you done jerking off Lucasfilm's ego now?
Yeah, I was getting there. Okay, so no game is perfect, and this game is certainly not that. Childlike wonder aside, this is one of the most draining games I've ever played. Levels go from roughly 15 minutes, perfect little length, to nearly 30 or 40 minutes long! It got so bad that when playing up to Chapter 3, I actually fell asleep. I fell asleep playing this game! That's probably the worst insult I can give to something, and I'm sad to give it to something like Star Wars. The chapters get longer, and the levels become less straightforward. I was probably wandering around this weird apartment complex in Coruscant for maybe 10 minutes because I didn't think to look for this tiny grate in this room full of giant doors. Or maybe this part in the Uvu 4 prison with 4 massive doors that didn't open because, I forgot to kill this one guy that was hiding in the corner. Or maybe that part in the same chapter where you have to blow up the reactor to escape and you end up in this central room that's incredibly tall and that doesn't tell you where to go, and one slip up means you fall to your death. Oh, and did I mention that it's constantly flooded with enemies who can hit you out of the sky because their laser shots track you? It's around this point in the game where the developers decide that difficulty, it doesn't mean challenging your maneuverability or gunplay. It means sending waves and waves of enemies that you've already killed dozens of times after you. Especially when they can just randomly spawn behind you, or from rooms you've just been in. You get 5 attempts to complete a stage, and when you lose all your continues, you gotta play the entire level over. Checkpoints are placed fair enough, but it stings really bad when none of your deaths are your fault, and now you're booted back to the start. Let's talk weapons some more. Scattered throughout the chapters are weapons that can run out of ammo. There's the machine gun like blaster rifle that shows up once the entire game to my knowledge, the heavy gun that also just seems to stop appearing halfway through, poison darts that can kill in one hit but good luck aiming with the analog sticks. Level 4 gives you a sniper rifle that you might barely use. At least I barely used it, because why bother trying to use stealth to your advantage when the enemies can see you from over 12 parsecs away? It's bullshit, and I'm not giving it a pass. There's a difference between fair challenge and unnecessarily hard nonsense. It got so bad that by Tatooine, I gave up on using strategy altogether and just mashed the fire button. The combat in this game is not deep whatsoever. Just because the game gives you options and I applaud it for at least making the effort, doesn't mean that the combat does not boil down to how fast you can spam the A button. So the level starts, and for some reason you just don't have your jetpack. It's not explained why Jango isn't using it. Not only does this cut your movement options in half, it also takes away weapons like the rocket and the flamethrower. The first level chapter went on for 45 minutes, and I had to keep reminding myself that this was only the first level of the chapter. Look at all the enemies here! They never seem to die, no matter how much plasma you fill them with. They're like roaches. You kill one, and 20 more pop out. Oops, I should have known there was gonna be a guy there. They come from every angle, and you never get room to breathe. I've played games where enemies, rush you in waves. But at least in games like Gears of War or Man vs. Machine in Team Fortress 2, the whole game is centered around that mechanic. Why bother using your good gear, wasting it, when more of them will just flood the arena anyway?
Are these guys gonna die or what?
I can't fight them all off,
Well then run! Just get out of there!
I can't! Hey, you pursue bounties, right?
Why else would I be here?
Well, it's really hard to do things like pursue alternate bounties and look for secrets when you're constantly being bombarded by mercs. Looking in first person with your scouter also identifies secondary bounties within the level. You are a bounty hunter after all. Some levels can have as little as 5, others as many as 30. This is a neat idea, turning a collectible into a game mechanic, but because you have to stop dead in your tracks and manually scan each NPC because they just aren't marked by themselves when you enter the level, it turns into a cumbersome chore that I don't bother with and only end up finding them because I'm scouting ahead. If you kill a potential bounty without marking them, you just can't collect them. Joke's on you. If you kill them and they fall off a cliff, that's also a bummer. Shame, because you get cute little flavor texts whenever they're being hunted. For instance, Miko, he's the primary antagonist of the first level who you send to prison. Later on, when you're in the prison, you run into him again, and he's wanted dead for hijacking the beast seen in the very beginning of the game by its owner. Cool things like that tie the world together for me. The world is changing as I move through the game, it's evolving. So it's very unfortunate that this entire mechanic just doesn't work. When you collect a bounty, you earn credits. Do you use these credits to purchase upgrades? Nope. You get concept art and blooper reel gags. You know why I don't bother with these? Because this game has cheat codes, so you don't have to bother with it. Why don't games have cheat codes anymore, by the way? If it weren't for this code, I would have to play through the entire first chapter again when it didn't save my data. So, after you go all the way across the galaxy hunting the Bando Gora and Komari Vosa, you occasionally have to also deal with Montross, who abandoned his tribe of Mandalorians and left Jango's father, Jaster Mareel, to die. You bump into Montross a few times throughout the game, because Count Dooku didn't just offer Vosa to Jango, he offered her to Montross too. And whoever succeeded in this bounty would of course go on to become the base for the clone army. Obviously we know Jango wins. Eventually, after a dire duel, the two Mandalorians finally part ways for good on the outskirts of Komari Vosa's hidden moon base. Jango finds her hidden base with assistance from Sam Wessel, who he meets earlier on in the game. They have a pretty awesome dynamic, and their relationship, while not entirely fleshed out, is very cute, and I enjoy seeing them interact. Eventually, she frees Jango from capture, and he goes to face Vosa. After she's beaten, Jango meets Count Dooku, and the two discuss their clone army. Jango agrees, under the condition that he gets one unaltered clone for himself, who he of course raises to be Boba Fett.
Yep.
Jango carries Sam away into the sunset and the game ends.
We're going to split the bounty 50-50, right?
Don't push your luck, Sam.
Aw, what a happy moment. Hey, how does their relationship end up going again? So, Star Wars Bounty Hunter. It's a pretty good game, but by the end of it, I really wanted to stop playing. The only thing that kept me going was that I wanted to see how the story would unfold and be treated by the cutscenes and the character interactions. My journey in this land is over. Time to hang up my Beskar and say goodbye to this game I once held near and dear to my heart.